Hello, my name is Ravi Kanbur. I'm Th. Professor of World Affairs here at Cornell University. Usually the lecture room is full, but today I'm speaking to you about questions of global inequality and poverty. I was born in India. I was raised and educated in England and worked at the World Bank in Washington, D.C. before coming here to Cornell University. My professional life has been devoted to confronting questions of global inequality and poverty, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. We're often told that we're in an era of rising global inequality. There is in fact truth to this, but actually the global pattern is highly differentiated and nuanced. And this is some of the points that I want to get across in this video and in a series of videos which will address these questions. Let me start by talking about a region of the world in which, in fact, we are now. This is the advanced economies of the world. This is the US, Britain, Western Europe, and so on. And here, for these countries, there's absolutely no question. The detailed work of Thomas Piketty and Tony Atkinson and Emmanuel Saez has shown that inequality has been on the rise for the last 30 years. The income share of the top 1% of the economy has gone up very sharply. And in fact, the income share of the top 0.1% of the economy has gone up even more sharply than this. So far as the advanced, mature industrial economies of the world are concerned, there's no question that inequality has been on the rise in the last 30 years. But the second region of the world in which inequality has been rising are the large developing countries of Asia. This is China, this is India, this is Vietnam, this is Bangladesh, Indonesia, and so on. Countries accounting for more than half the world's population. In these countries, inequality has been on the rise. So, putting together the advanced economies of the world and these big Asian economies, one might indeed think that we're living in an era of rising global inequality. And we might ask the question, what explains this increase? What explains this increase, and is it the same explanation for the advanced economies as the big Asian economies of the world? But you know, there's a region of the world in which this trend has been bucked, and that is Latin America. For the big Latin American economies, Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, and so on, for all of these countries, inequality has been falling, has been declining over the last 20 to 25 years. And we might ask the question, why? How did this happen? How did these countries manage to stall the rise in inequality when countries in Asia did not? Actually, we know the answer to that. It is to do with how governments in these countries adopted policies to address questions of inequality. And I will talk about this in a separate video devoted to Latin America. So we've covered three regions of the world: the advanced economies, the big Asian economies, and Latin America. Let's turn now to a region of the world which saw the Arab Spring, the Arab uprisings, Middle East and North Africa, MENA, the so-called MENA region of the world. And it's often said in narratives of the Arab Spring, of the Arab uprisings, that it was inequality which led to people taking to the streets, and it was high and rising inequality which actually brought governments down. But in fact, conventionally measured inequality, conventional measures of inequality which economists use all the time, actually have not been rising in this part of the world. If you take Egypt and Tunisia, for example, two countries where governments were indeed overthrown, in these countries, inequality, as conventionally measured, was either stable or actually declining. So the question then arises, what's the connection between inequality and political and social discontent? If in this part of the world there wasn't this intimate connection, maybe it was inequality of a different sort. And we'll be discussing this in another video which will be put up on the website. So that's Middle East and North Africa. Let us now turn to Sub-Saharan Africa. And here we see very differentiated patterns. We have countries like South Africa, like Ghana, like Uganda, where inequality rose. We have countries like Kenya, like Senegal and Guinea, where inequality fell. And this is in the same region of the world, facing the same global forces. So again, the question arises, why did it rise in one place and fall in another? So there you are. There's 5 regions of the world in which we have very different patterns of patterns and trends of inequality change in the last 25 to 30 years. What we need to do is to understand the different patterns and how public policy plays into these different patterns. But going beyond these regional patterns, there are three global questions that I would like to put as well. These questions cut across these regional differences in the world. The first question is it really inequality of income that we're concerned about? Some people say, surely inequality of outcome is not important. What is important is inequality of opportunity, is whether everybody has the same chance starting from where they're starting from. Okay? The fact that inequality is increasing should be neither here nor there from this perspective. It's inequality of opportunity that matters. But others, including myself, have argued that inequality of income can feed into inequality of opportunity, that rising inequality of income leads to rising inequality of opportunity. And this is a topic, an issue that we have to discuss, and we will have a separate session on this. Secondly, there's an important question about inequality within countries and inequality between countries. In the advanced economies and in the big Asian economies, inequality within countries has been rising. But inequality between countries, for example, inequality between China and India on the one hand, and US and Europe on the other, has been declining because these countries have been growing faster than the advanced economies. So that aspect of inequality has been narrowed. How do we think about the balance between inequality within countries and inequality between countries? In particular, how do we think about foreign aid and development assistance when a country can become a middle-income country, its average income can rise, and yet because it has high degrees of inequality within the country, there are large numbers of poor people in that country. That's the second question, the second global question that we're faced with. The third question that I would like to put is to do with inequality when we think about very long-term and inequality across generations. And this is very closely linked to the question of climate change. Okay? As we know, climate change is likely to affect the poorest countries of the world worse than the richer countries of the world. But measures to mitigate climate change, for example, through reduction in the use of fossil fuel, through reduction in the fossil fuel energy content of growth, could actually affect the economic growth of the poorest countries. So in fact, we could have a trade-off between inequality of future generations and inequality of present generations. It's that trade-off that I think is the third global question that we need to address. So these 5 patterns of global inequality trends for advanced economies, for the big economies of Asia, for Latin America, for Middle East and North Africa, and for Sub-Saharan Africa, combined with these 3 questions which cut across the global spectrum, are the questions that this series of videos will be addressing.